Well, here in New York, the embattled New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio is now beginning an emergency closed-door meeting just moments ago with 5 police union leaders from 5 different unions. Some have blasted his handling of a recent turmoil here in New York City and across the country, accusing him of contributing to the hostile climate for the NYPD. Here's the mayor speaking at a police graduation ceremony, getting a mixture of cheers and boos.
You'll confront poverty. You'll confront mental illness, illegal guns, and a still too divided society. All of these challenges. You didn't create these problems, but you can help our city to overcome them. You can be part of the solution.
Well, in the meantime, there is a new report by the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. It shows that police fatalities are now at a 3-year high that is led by a 56% increase in the number of officers who are killed by gunfire. So let's bring in Dan Bongino, a former NYPD officer, former Secret Service agent for President Obama, and an international security consultant. Dan, thanks for joining us. A lot to talk about here. Let's start with Mayor Bill de Blasio. You know, he talked about a divided society. It's kind of bringing racial divisions back into it again. I'm wondering if he just has a tin ear and he's not getting it. An apology goes a long way in smoothing over things.
Well, Heather, I think you're being generous. He has a lead ear. A tin ear would be an improvement for this guy. You know, he talks about this divided society as he adds fuel to the fire that creates an even further chasm and division among us. You know, his major mistake here, Heather, was, listen, the cops don't expect him in New York to default to a pro-police response in every incident, but they also don't expect him to default to an anti-police response in that incident either, and that's what he did. He jumped out, he put a racism overtone to this argument when there was no evidence of that, and he's alienated the cops. I don't see how he repairs this relationship.
Okay, I want to ask you about that report I just mentioned about the death rate among officers increasing in the past year alone, mostly due to shootings. And I want to read you a quote from the chairman of the fund. His name is Craig Floyd, and he says, quote, "I'm deeply concerned that there is a growing anti-government sentiment in America. It is influencing weak-minded individuals to launch violent assaults against the men and women working to enforce our laws and keep our nation safe." He goes on to say we need to tone down the rhetoric and rally in support of law enforcement officers. I'm wondering, where is the national leadership on this issue? Somebody needs to be saying it, and he's among the very first to be saying that.
Yeah, and this is really an odd, multi-layered argument here we're having about this, because there's a group of people on the far left and some on the other side of the political spectrum who also are, you know, the front line of government, Heather, is law enforcement. That's what we see and interact with largely outside of, say, the DMV and the post office. And they usually take the brunt of it, unfairly so. You know, we can have a common sense conversation about the militarization of policing, the over-criminalization of society. Those are fair debates. But it's not the cops' fault or the federal agents' fault that's just really going to work. That's
okay,
a larger
so Dan,
argument.
you are saying that as a former Secret Service agent, a former member of the NYPD, and Dan, we all know you here, but there needs to be some national leadership on this. Who is the right person to do that?
Well, I think it's going to be a debate in the 2016 presidential election. You know, these were tragic incidents in Ferguson and the Garner incident in Staten Island. But the timing to bring it to a national spotlight what was actually may turn out to be advantageous because it was right near a presidential election. And you and I both know this is going to come up in these presidential debates.
A real shame that it will have to come down to that to make this more of a national issue. You know, you have a lot of friends who are officers. When you talk with them, whether it's here in New York City or across the country, how are they feeling now about doing their jobs in light of just all of this unrest that we are seeing coast to coast?
Well, you know what's taken a little bit of the edge off this, Heather, is they're getting a lot of calls of support into the precincts, into the police facilities from everyday civilians who are saying, hey, you know, listen, we're not part of this. Thank you for what you do, and we appreciate it. But that's not to say they're not hurting right now. I can tell you the contacts I have in the New York City Police Department from when I went through the academy almost 2 decades ago. They're done with this mayor. Again, I don't see any way they repair this. They feel like he crossed the line and there's really no turning back. And sadly, I don't even know if this meeting, with the union officials today, there's anything that can be done to repair it. Yeah,
that meeting starting just a short while ago, so we're still waiting to see what comes out of that, certainly, if anything, and also an apology, potentially. if it ever
Yeah.
comes. Dan Bongino, Jan, thank you so much for your service to our country, and thanks for joining us again today.
Thanks, Heather.